talk about that. So, okay. So, official good morning. How'd the quiz go? Huh? It was okay. No big deal. So so. Okay, I'll take so so. I'll take so so. Right? Sometimes when you like finish a test and you think you nailed it, and then there's that part of your brain that's like, oh no, did I it couldn't have been that easy. You know? Did I did I just miss the point and write everything wrong and I thought I was right? But so maybe like so so is good because like cautiously optimistic. I don't know.
What's the answer to the bonus question?
What's the answer to the bonus question?
It's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it tomorrow. Let's do that because I want to read what you wrote first, and then we'll talk about it. What was,
Sexual identity is like an individual that desire
Okay.
sexual partner.
okay,
Right?
okay. What did I ask you? Gender, sexual. Okay, what's sexual identity? Yeah, it's kind of the sexual orientation that people present to society, right? So again, you don't have to do this you don't have to make a big deal out of this, right? But I've mentioned my fiance, I've mentioned that she is a she, right? And so I've kind of, I've presented myself as a heterosexual person, right? Which I am. But I've kind of indicated that to you in a subtle way, right? So you don't have to make a big deal about it, whether you're straight or gay or lesbian or whatever. It doesn't mean you have to like walk down the hall waving a big flag or wear t-shirts or anything, although you can, but you don't really have to, right? You just present yourself as something to society, whether you're a straight person or a gay person or a lesbian person or whatever you might be, you're kind of indicating that to society, right? And like Irina said, it's kind of based on your sexual orientation, right? Sometimes. Yeah, what influences how you present yourself to society? What kind of determines that? Okay, what about culture? Yeah. Yeah, some countries, some cultures, some eras, some times, it wasn't really acceptable to not be a straight person, right? And so people would kind of pretend to be straight, right? They would present themselves to society that way, even though that wasn't really their sexual orientation, that wasn't really how they felt or what they desired to be, but it was the only safe option for them. And so that's what they did, right? And so lots and lots of gay and lesbian people, probably over the centuries, have hidden, right? They've pretended to be straight people when in fact they were not. Yeah. Okay, let's see what we have today here. What do I have? Oh, yes, yes, yes. So yesterday we watched that TED Talk with Christopher Ryan, right? And what we were talking about is the control of sexuality. And we said that in every culture has controls on sexuality, right? Who's allowed to have sex with who, when, how old you have to be, who is not an acceptable sexual partner, are you allowed to have one sexual partner or multiple ones? All of that stuff is kind of controlled, right? And some societies have very tight, rigid controls, right? There's no sex before marriage, and then when you get married, you can only have sex with that other person, and that's it for the rest of your life, right? Some religions or societies are so extreme that they say that, well, sex is really only for procreation. You're not really supposed to do it for fun, kind of thing. So, some people have very, very tight controls on sexuality. Some cultures are a lot more flexible, right? A lot more permissive, right? And Christopher Ryan mentioned a couple of them in his TED Talk. The Mosuo people in southwest China, they are a culture that he says, and he's correct, he says that people are kind of sexually autonomous, right? And so sometimes they are married to members of the opposite sex, but because they organize their families differently, the sexual partner thing doesn't matter as much, right? So, for instance, if I have, let's say I'm a father, okay? I live in the Mosuo culture in southwest China. I'm a father. The mother of my child, she lives with her brothers and sisters, okay? So she lives with her family, with her mother's family. And the brothers and sisters kind of raise the children together, okay? So most of our cultures, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of our cultures, we kind of organize around the nuclear family, right? Around mom and dad and the kids. Mom and dad and the kids live together, right? Sometimes we have grandparents that live with us, or mom, dad, and the kids will live usually with the husband's parents, right? That's often how that works. That's usually the way we kind of organize our families. But the Mosuo and just a few other people around the world, they organize them according to matrilineages. And so the mother of my child, she lives with her family. They're raising my kid, and my job is kind of to, for the most part, to help my sister raise her kids, right? That's kind of how the families are divided, right? So it's not quite so important for me to, I guess, sexuality is a little more autonomous, right? It's not connected to the family and the marriage in the same way that maybe lots of our cultures are. But anyway, I'm getting off track here. So we watched this, sorry, I'm going to jump ahead here. We watched this TED Talk because in part we wanted to ask the question of what is our sexuality for, right? Why do we have a sexuality that is complicated, right? Why do we have a sexuality that's not just about reproduction? And why do we have this kind of double standard between men and women, right? Why are men encouraged to be promiscuous and women are encouraged not to be, right? They're encouraged to be chaste, right? They're supposed to, not chaste like run after, but chaste as in, kind of pure and virginal and, not having many sexual partners. There's two different messages there. And so I asked you yesterday what Christopher Ryan's argument was, and we heard a lot of things, and he's kind of arguing a bunch of things at the same time, okay? And so there's a few different things, and let me help you out here. So he's making a comparison between us and our closest relatives, apes, right? And in fact, he goes so far as to say we are apes, which is correct. You are all bipedal, mostly hairless, very intelligent apes, I'm sorry to say. It's not usually flattering to be called an ape, right? But we are, right? That's what we are. And he says that when you compare us to other apes in terms of our sexual behavior and our kind of sexual anatomy, our sexual physiology, you'll see that actually we're a lot more like apes that are promiscuous, right? We're not really like the apes that are polygynous or that have harems, like a gorilla. A male gorilla will have a bunch of females that he kind of keeps to himself, and he mates with them, and he doesn't let other males anywhere near them. We're not really like gorillas, but we're not really like gibbons either. Gibbons are pair bonders, right? A male and a female stay together for years and years and years. And Christopher Ryan says we're not really like them either. We're much more like chimpanzees and bonobos in how we behave, right? So he's making kind of a claim there. He's making an argument about what kind of ape are we? Well, he thinks we're a promiscuous one, right? We're one that is kind of evolved to have multiple sexual partners. And of course, we can choose not to, right? We can choose to be monogamous. We can choose to follow our cultural or religious beliefs. And of course, that's one of the things that makes us human, right? we've created a whole slew of rules that are there to help us cooperate in society, right? Social norms, socialization, right? But that's not quite who we're evolved to be, right? So he showed us this kind of cute little clever graphic here that compared us to some of our other ape friends. And again, we're much more similar to the chimps and the bonobos than we are to the gorillas and the gibbons and the orangutans. Right? Yeah. So he's also making, there's a bonobo. He's also making an argument about what sexuality is for, right? And so he said that early on, or years ago, people thought that sexuality was all about kind of an economic exchange, if you will, right? There was this idea, back when we were cavemen, there was this idea of man the hunter, right? This sort of buff, muscular guy in a, wearing an animal skin with a spear, and he was out there defending against wild animals and hunting them and sort of being strong and building fire, right? There was this idea of man as providing the meat and the shelter and the protection, right? And women, needing those things, promised their sexual fidelity to a man, right? I will only have sex with you, you big strong caveman, if you share your hunted meat with me, if you protect me and give me shelter and stuff like that, and I promise I will only have sex with you. And it's a nice idea, except, well, maybe it's not a nice idea, but regardless of whether you like it or not, it doesn't really square with what we know about hunter-gatherers today, right? In basically every hunter-gatherer culture that does exist or has existed that we know of, people share things all the time, right? In fact, most of them don't really have a concept of private ownership, okay? And this is hard for us to get our heads around because we do, right? This computer is mine. This is mine. This phone is mine, right? If people steal it from me, they can go to jail, right? We have a very strong concept of private property, but hunter-gatherers don't, right? They just have, there are things, right? You can't own things. This is everyone's, right? I happen to be using it, but it doesn't really belong to me, right? And so hunter-gatherers share things all the time. And people who don't share, well, they're kind of looked down upon. They're not really respected. They're kind of socially excluded from the group. They're punished, right? Because the social norm is sharing. Right? So that doesn't really work, right? Because women don't have to promise their sexual fidelity to a man to get food and shelter and protection, because everybody shares everything, right? A woman can get everything she needs from the group. And to be honest with you, if there are any feminists in the room, for the most part in many hunter-gatherer cultures, it's actually the women who provide the more consistent food for the group, because the men go out hunting usually, and the women go out foraging. So the women are looking for roots and berries and seeds and nuts and things like that. And the women are kind of the ones that bring things back consistently. If you know anything about hunting, sometimes you go out and you don't get anything, right? You don't see any animals, or they hear you sneaking up on them, or you shoot and you miss. Sometimes you don't come home with anything, right? So it's kind of the women who are feeding the group more consistently. And then sometimes the men come home with an animal and it's woo, everybody's happy, but women have an important role in feeding the group. And so they don't need men to feed them, right? In fact, it's probably the other way around more than anything. But yeah, this old model doesn't work, right? This idea that there's this economic exchange, right? And so he's saying that in our past, before we started to farm, probably our ancestors had multiple sexual relationships going on at any one time, right? There was we probably weren't super monogamous to begin with, right? And so he says that our sexuality has kind of evolved as a bonding device, right? It's a way that we create and maintain social relationships. yes, we reproduce that way, but that's not really its main focus. It's not really its main function, right? Again, it's a way that we can better cooperate with each other and bond with each other. And so maybe that wasn't a fair question when I asked you what the argument was, because there's kind of a few arguments there. But we did pull a few of those things out. Okay? Now, he also said a couple of other things. So he said that he hopes that his research or his book will kind of get rid of the idea that men have some right to monitor and control women's sexual behavior. And he also said something about women's sexuality becoming conflated or combined with property rights. Now, what does he mean by the first one? Is that a true statement that men in some societies monitor and control women's sexual behavior? Is there truth to that somehow? Does that ring true for you in some way? What do you think? Is that something that men try to do? Or think that they can do? Avi, what do you think?
No.
Okay, why not?
No.
What?
Like, how do you monitor?
I mean, like they kind of make it their business. They kind of have something to say about women's sexual behavior. Do you think that's true?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, why do you think that's true?
Well, you have a habit of doing it.
Because we have a habit of doing it?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you think of or can you or anyone else, can you think of an example in which men kind of monitor or pay attention to women's sexual behavior or sexuality? Can you think of something? No? Anna, what do you think? Say that one more time. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, well, I guess that's true, right? We said a man who's had a number of sexual partners, he's congratulated for that, right? That's a high five thing, right? For most, but for women, they kind of get judged for that, don't they? Right? They get judged for that. What other ways, I know we only have a minute left here, but what other ways do men kind of try to monitor or control women's sexuality? Oh, okay. Yeah. So in some cultures, in some countries, a woman's sexual behavior is connected to the honor of her family, right? So it's not just, it's not just this woman, had a few sexual partners, or she had her, she had sex with the wrong person, or when she wasn't supposed to. It doesn't just make her bad, it actually has an impact on her family as well, right? How her family is seen in the public eye, right? Whereas men often, it's not quite the same, right? Men can't really dishonor their families in the same way that women can, right? In some cultures. Last thing maybe, what about dress codes? Would you say that if you go to a school, let's say, that has a dress code, would you say that more of the rules apply to women than men? Yeah? Why is that? Why is that? Don't know. What? I thought you said racism. I was like, no. Not everything is racism. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. We've got like 30 seconds left here. So I'll push pause on that. Come back tomorrow. We'll talk about this idea of men controlling women's sexuality and maybe kind of where, historically speaking, where that idea comes from, okay? So until then, you can pack it up. I'll try to mark these for you today so that we can have them back tomorrow too. Also, we'll probably do, as I mentioned to you yesterday, I'll just turn off my live stream here.